welcome to State of the Nation, and this is a broadcast brought to you by Npaper's television network live from Harare. In our discussion today, we're continuing on the Nprc Visibility and Awareness Campaign. Today, we will focus on Research and Knowledge Management Thematic Committee. Now, the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission is mandated to receive and investigate complaints from the public in instances where conflicts arise as a result of human rights violations, as provided for in the Constitution and the Nprc Act. Citizens have the constitutional right to approach the Nprc to lodge complaints. And joining us today to discuss this and more is Commissioner Choice Ndoro. Commissioner, very good morning and welcome.
Thank you very much. Very good morning, Christine.
Now, of course, if you have any comments or views on our show today, please connect with us via our Facebook page, Npaper's TV network, or our Twitter handle @ZTN News. Now, Commissioner, your thematic committee was instrumental in developing the Nprc strategic plan. What was the process in coming up with the strategic plan, and how involved were other stakeholders in this development?
Thank you, Christine. And it's actually a coincidence that today is Africa Day and Happy Africa Day. And it was actually the Banjul Protocol, the discussions that started around 2006 when Africans, heads of states, actually came together to say there are conflicts in Africa and there are peculiarities in the way conflicts should be managed and transformed in Africa. And then they put a framework, they put principles and values in which various member states who wished to put in place the healing and reconciliation committees should follow. And one of them is actually the victim-centeredness. They also said we need victims to be part of the process. They also said we need the involvement of communities. So we have to take a bottom-up approach in the resolution of conflicts. And they also said, emphasized the need to address the root causes of the conflicts. Because in most cases you would find that there were elite political pacts, elite political settlements that were taking place without actually the involvement and participation of the ordinary people and without addressing the root causes. And hence they then recommended this particular instrument. And then Zimbabwe in 2013 then put in place the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, that is a constitutional body, and Section 252 then outlines the 10 functions of the commission. And so the process after swearing in 2016 was a long, tedious process of actually coming up with a strategic plan. And the Research and Knowledge Management Thematic Committee that I chair was mandated to coordinate with the participation of other commissioners to actually come with a national a strategic plan. And so the process, the first step was to interrogate the 10 functions because we come from different backgrounds. Others had hermeneutical backgrounds, others had neoliberal backgrounds, others had socialist backgrounds, and so forth and so forth. And so we had to come together to say, how do we conceptualize and understand the 10 functions, so that if we are discussing any particular function, you are actually discussing, singing from one hymn book, so to speak. And so we looked at the 10 functions, and we noted that the 10 functions can actually be categorized into 3 broad categories. Functions that deal with the past, functions that deal with the present, and functions that deal with the future. And so you realize that functions that deal with the past, when I'm saying past, I'm talking about the historical past, the political past, the social past, the economic past in Zimbabwe. And so you realize that like Section A, Function A deals with post-conflict justice. And so we actually took a long time to interrogate, to say, what do we mean by justice? And whose justice are we talking about? And what are the facets and variables that constitute the component of justice? And then we realize that they are actually retributive justice, which is actually a court process and a legal process that needs evidence in order to bring about that justice. And we also realized that there was retributive, restorative justice, justice, which is this justice where society have got to be restored. The societal fabric is then restored through dialogue facilitation, through conflict resolution, through rehabilitation, and which we saw actually that it was actually a higher value of justice. So the redistributive justice. And we also realized that in terms of the natural resources, there is redistributive justice, where we are saying, how can we have inclusive economic growth? How can the natural resources be distributed in a manner where everybody benefits from? And so you can see the amount of rigor, the amount of discussion, the amount of analysis and introspection that the commissioners did in order just to conceptualize and to understand the functions. This is just one function. And then we went on to other functions like truth-telling, which is function C, dialogue facilitation, like complaints handling, like conciliation, mediation, and so forth and so forth. And so it took a long time for the commission. And when we were sworn in 2016, we were unable to engage communities up to until 2018 because we did not have enabling legislation. It had to be passed through Parliament. And so this was a blessing in disguise because we were able to have more time to interrogate and to understand. So when we took the 10 functions, we then categorized them. And we realized conflict justice deals with the past. Function C, truth-telling, deals with the past. Function D, dialogue facilitation, deals with the past and the present. And when we are talking about dialogue facilitation, in relation to the past, we are talking about restorative dialogues that can take place. We also looked at function F, that talks about complaints that can come from the past. Past violations, a victim can then come with complaints to the commission. And we also looked at function H, that talks about mediation and conciliation of the past. And so we said all these functions constitute a group of functions of the commission as stipulated in section 252 of the Constitution to deal with the past. And so we realized that dealing with the past is one of the expectations that we were supposed to fulfill. And then we look at the other functions. We realize that some of the functions then fell in the present, and these are the complaints handling, current violations, current conflicts, current complaints can actually then fall into that category. Issues of conciliation and mediation of the current also are in the present. Recommendation of legislation could be also in the past and also in the present. So we also noted that there was an overlap of functions. And then we went on to the future, that there were functions that constituted a group of functions that dealt with the future. These were the functions that dealt with aspects of prevention and non-recurrent. And so that one step, that was step one, just to conceptualize and understand and use the same lens of analysis. As I've said, that we had different lenses coming from different backgrounds, and so we had to use the same lens in coming up with an understanding, a complete understanding of our functions. Step one. So step two then went on to a skills audit. Who are we? As I've said, we're coming from different backgrounds. So we had to understand who is Choice Ndoro Rusike, who is Patience Chiranza, who is Charles Masununguri. And so we then had to take our skills and say, what do we know? What are the hard skills that we have? What are the soft skills that are necessary to move Zimbabwe forward? And then we did a skills audit. So that was very important because we were able to say, so-and-so, Commissioner Jeffrey Chada, you lead media because he's an expert in media. Commissioner Choice Rusike, you lead research and knowledge management because I've done a bit of research elsewhere. Yes. And Commissioner Chiradza, who was with Jomic and who was responsible for political parties. Was
the obvious choice.
Was an obvious choice for prevention and non-recurrence, which involved the engagement of political parties and setting up of committees, thematic committees. And so that was critical for us. So that was step number two, to do a skills audit in order to to have efficiency in the way we handled the issues of healing and reconciliation. And after that, we then did provincial consultations, where we went to the provinces to say, now that the task is laid before us in the Constitution, now that we understand, how then what is the perception of the provinces? And so we're able to go to all the 10 provinces in Zimbabwe, just at provincial level, to just have a glimpse and understanding of the various conflicts that were bedeviling provinces. And the provinces came up with a number of conflicts that ranged from political conflicts to economic conflicts to social conflicts, that also took us back to as far back as 11th century Mapungu, so to speak. And I will talk about it later on. And so the provincial consultations, we also talked to traditional leaders to find out, because we also did a sectoral approach also to understand. Traditional leaders came to discuss with us. We discussed with the war veterans concerning conflicts. We discussed with women's organizations. We discussed with youth organizations. We discussed with faith-based organizations. And so the issue of consultations was very key. And all those, actually, there were sectoral submissions that were then made to the commission. And after understanding that, we needed to do a desk survey of the various conflicts. And it was a blessing that that Parliament then left it open to say the Commission's work does not start from this year, because that gave us impetus to go back to understand the root causes. Remember, in relation to the Banjul recommendation and framework, that actually said deal with the root causes. And it's also in the Zimbabwean constitution. And so it gave us impetus to go back to say, where did the conflict start? And because if you are not careful, if you do not have a comprehensive understanding of the conflicts that have happened in a country, you risk causing more conflict. So you have got to be informed. You've got to have that maturity. You've got to have that rigor. You've got to have that in-depth understanding.
Obviously, in attempts to, like you rightfully said, restorative justice, isn't it?
Yes. And so we went back, and I'll talk about it later, that we went as far back as 11th century. Because you realize that conflicts in Zimbabwe were nothing new from the first epoch or the first period. They are cyclical in nature. And so they keep coming back and coming back. So that gave us a leeway to put in place strategies to then deal with the root causes of those conflicts. So that was the other step that we took of conflict mapping, conflict analysis. We then went on to have experiential learning, where we had to learn from other African commissions to understand what were their challenges, what were their advantages
to dealing with these challenges.
How did they deal with truth? How did they deal with public hearings? How did they deal with issues of restorative justice? And I'm very glad that we got a lot of information. We sat down on numerous times with South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, with the commissioners and secretariat to go through the process. Remember, South Africa took 1.5 years just to prepare. And 6 months, because there's a 2-year mandate, 6 months to do hearings. And they only had one function, which was truth-telling. Now, Nprc has 10 functions. And so, inevitably, it took us so much time to prepare. And so we heard from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa. We also heard from Kenya. The commission in Kenya came on numerous times to share their experiences. We also heard from Sierra Leone. Also in terms of public hearings, they came, and we also we heard from Rwanda, we heard from Ghana. Ghana also came 2 or 3 times, just to walk with us concerning their experiences, and so we're able to say this experience helps us, this experience does not help us, and this is our context. Because remember, at every point we will contextualize to say, given the context in which we are operating in, what is it that we can borrow, what is it that we can borrow, and so that was step number 6. Step number 7, we then did a draft strategic plan. Now we have got the consultations from the provinces, we have sectoral presentations from the various sectors, we have got desk survey of the conflicts that have happened in Zimbabwe since 11th century Mapungubwe. We have experiential learning from sister commissions, and so we then came back and then said, this is the draft, this is what we feel given all this should be the strategic plan for Zimbabwe. Because remember, it's not the strategic plan for the Nprc. It is the strategic plan for Zimbabwe. Nprc is just coordinating and facilitating the strategic plan. We then had to have our stakeholders. Your other question, part B of your question, was on stakeholders.
Yes,
so you can see,
with the stakeholders.
so you can see the involvement of the stakeholders, the sectoral presentations, the chiefs, the traditional leaders, and everything. And so we still wanted their confirmation, because a national healing and reconciliation process must have ownership. If it fails to have ownership, it fails before it even takes off. It must have inclusivity. Everybody has got to feel included in the process. And so we had to call our stakeholders to say, stakeholders, states, non-state actors, come together. This is this is the draft. And they made further inputs to say, here we want you to do that, here I think we should revise that, and so forth and so forth. So that was step number 8, where we then conducted a national convergence and validation conference to validate, and so our stakeholders were able to validate, to say, yes, this is what we want for Zimbabwe. And that then enabled us to produce the final strategic plan. So we are very proud of it. This is our 5-year national strategic plan. It's 2018 to 2022. It's a 5-year national strategic plan. And so the rationale, as I have said before, of having to take the 9 steps, having to take so much time in order to come with a strategic plan, was in order to have inclusivity. And you also realize that one of our values as Nprc is inclusivity. And to re-emphasize that the issue of inclusivity is very important, so that you don't leave anybody behind. The issue of buy-in, the issue of best practices, and a common understanding that this is the plan. So after that, the last stage was to engage. Again, to ensure that everybody is on the same page. To engage, to say, this is the strategic plan, this is what we have developed, and we walked through various organs of the states, and non-state actors. And so we went to the army, we presented, we went to the Central Intelligence, we presented, we went to political parties, the various political parties, we presented, we went to women's organizations, we presented, we went to youth organizations, to traditional leaders, so we had, so that we have a buy-in, so that when Nprc is talking about a national strategic plan, there is buy-in. We then went on to the provinces and replicated these structures, where we say we spoke to the PIOs, we spoke to the propos for the police, we spoke to the provincial organizations that are represented, Nango at national level, it's at provincial levels, the structures there, youth organizations also at provincial level. So that was the process that brought this strategic plan.
Well, it's quite a detailed process, and I must say, for something that has to work out the way that it must, it was key and essential for you to go so far with your efforts. Now, you've told us what it took to develop your strategic plan. Can you tell us what you seek to achieve with this plan?
Okay. I think this then feeds into what I've been saying, that after we categorized the 10 functions into 3 categories, we realized that we had 4 natural goals. The first goal that deals with the past. Remember the first cluster of functions dealt with the past, and so the first goal sought to achieve a reconciled, healed, and cohesive nation.
Say that again, please, in case someone missed it. I love it.
The first goal dealt with the past, and the goal or the end result of the activities that are in there are to have a reconciled, healed, and cohesive nation. So you want a Zimbabwe that is reconciled.
Yes.
That is the whole purpose of dealing with the past. Dealing with the past has everything to do with bringing Zimbabweans together. Not dividing Zimbabweans, not causing more hostilities, not causing more tensions, not causing more polarization. But it is there in order to reconcile. So whatever even the dialogues that we're talking about were to reconcile Zimbabweans. And so that is why we had that goal. So the goal is it actually emphasizes one aspect of reconciled and a Zimbabwe that is healed. There is a lot of pain, there's a lot of suffering, some of it even transferred to other generations. And so we said we need Zimbabweans to heal. We need Zimbabweans to heal. You also realize that even Vision 2030, even the TSP program hinges its success on a healed and reconciled Zimbabwe, on a cohesive and united Zimbabwe. And so you'll see that we were also feeding, or we are also feeding into government programs of Vision 2030 of the TSP. And so the goal number 1 will feed in directly into the government initiatives, the vision and the policy. And so in that goal, we are dealing with the past, as I've already said. So we are having restorative dialogues to say A did something to B and B is hurt. How do you restore the relations between A and B? And we actually had to learn that even so-called perpetrators, we don't call them perpetrators in the commission, we call them adversely mentioned people. Because the whole idea of to heal a nation is to unlock potential. There is potential in the victim. There is a potential in the adversely mentioned person. So it's to unlock potential to ensure that both victim and the adversely mentioned person contribute to national development. And so this goal also talks about restoring dialogues. You also realize that is the virtue of restorative justice. In retributive justice, it is very important. Somebody goes to court, they are sentenced, they go to prison. Now, in our African context, in our African setting, even if somebody goes to prison, the families still coexist. Yes. They still meet at the deep tank, their schools, they meet at their children's schools for sports, they meet at the well to fetch water. And so it is important that even if where the legal process has taken place, you also have a restoration of the relations so that you can have A and their family, B and their family coexisting, and both also pledging to say there should be a never again moment. Never again where B says, never again shall I violate you, A. And A says, I forgive you, and let us move forward. And so that is the role of that goal. So in order to have a reconciled Zimbabwe, there is need for truth-telling, which is function C of the in the Constitution, section 252. Truth is very important because it is the first step in the healing process. Where somebody where the truth is merely told to the victim. If you were following the South Africa Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that they only did truth-telling. And you could see, and research has also established that most of the victims who just wanted to hear the truth, what happened to my husband?
What happened to my family?
What happened to my family? What happened? What did you do? What happened? It is the first step of healing. And so some of the victims or survivors will then say, I just wanted to hear, I don't want any reparations, I don't want any money, I don't want anything, I just wanted to hear. I just wanted to know.
They just wanted the closure.
Yes, they just, exactly, they just wanted that closure. So truth-telling then becomes a bigger component in dealing with the past. And also the other aspect in dealing with the past is the assistance that is rendered to victims or to survivors. Survivors, one of the functions is the survivors who have undergone torture, who have undergone abuse, need rehabilitation and treatment. Some need prosthesis where the leg was or the arm was amputated. Most need psychological support, psychotherapy. They're traumatized. And as a country, we've never had a time where we're saying we have come out of this conflict epoch. Say, for instance, the liberation struggle. We've come out of a protracted liberation struggle. Have we healed and provided psychosocial support to those who participated in the liberation struggle? And so it is very important because you cannot unlock a person's full potential where they are still hurting, where they still have post-traumatic stress disorder, where they're still suffering from hallucinations. And so this goal also seeks to deal with issues of victims and restoring them. And the gender component comes in handy. The gender dimension that there are women usually suffer because they are being victimized because their husbands did 1, 2, 3 or belongs to this political party. So they suffer if they belong to some political party. They can suffer. They also suffer because their husbands are active in this political party. They suffer because their son or their daughter participated or is a member of this political party. And so we deliberately and took with gender lens in the analysis, in the putting in place of these goals and these activities and these initiatives to say we need to take the gender component. And so that goal deals with this is goal number 1. And so the second cluster of goals deals with the present. As you are solving the past, there are conflicts that are unraveling.
Yes.
There are conflicts that are happening. There are conflicts that, because we have had unresolved conflicts for years in Zimbabwe. And so these conflicts, we're seeing the manifestation, we're seeing the signs and symptoms of a deeper problem that has not been resolved. And so the Commission also has the responsibility to deal with conflicts and disputes that are happening. And so what we have done is we have reviewed the various legal provisions that are national ones. We have reviewed sectoral provisions, we have reviewed laws, we have reviewed practices, we have reviewed behaviors, we have reviewed values in order to make an audit to say which of these policies promote peace and which of these policies and laws and behaviors and actions do not promote peace. And so we then, the last function is a recommendation to Parliament to say we recommend. So each time we have submitted our annual report, it is a section of recommendations to say this is what we recommend should be done by decision makers and policy makers to have a conducive environment. And goal number 3 then deals with never again. Zimbabwe has got to come to a stage where we say never again shall we walk this road. Never again shall we brother violate brother in this way. Never again shall brother violate sister in this way. It is only when that has happened that we can realize our Vision 2030, that we can realize the TSP program, that we can realize the restoration, the unity, the cohesion that is required. And ultimately, we'll then have a national development. National development cannot take place before all the processes take place. It will be putting the cart before the horse. So we need to take a painful decision. We need to take a mature decision as a country to say we are pledging ourselves to ensure that the healing and reconciliation process takes place so that we can unlock the potential in everybody in order to realize national development.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Now you're watching State of the Nation, and we're getting to know more about the NPRC's Visibility and Awareness campaign. We'll continue our discussion with Commissioner Choice Ndoro when we come back. Stay with us. Thank you for joining us. You're still with us on State of the Nation, and we're talking to Commissioner Choice Ndoro, who is chairperson of the Thematic Committee on Research and Knowledge Management in the Nprc. Now, before the break, we were discussing, she was giving us some highlights, in-depth highlights, on the strategic plan of the Nprc and the functions of the Research and Knowledge Management Thematic Committee. Now, Ms. Commissioner, now the Thematic Committee derives its mandate from the Nprc Act section 3 subsection 2. Which research methods have you used to ascertain your findings?
So we have ensured that our research is above board because we are dealing with issues of national interests. We are dealing with issues that are emotive. And the methods that we use have got to bring out the truth of what happened. So in order to unravel what happened, there are research instruments that are employed or that we employed in order to come up with a position. We have used, for instance, the triangulation approach, where we're saying you use the questionnaire, in-depth questionnaire design. In-depth questionnaire or semi-structured interviews are critical in that they allow probing, they allow feelings and emotions, they allow accuracy in order to judge accuracy, validity, and reliability. And so there are instruments that we've used. For instance, when we will be doing a baseline survey soon, we were supposed to have started just before lockdown, and we will be doing it as soon as the environment permits it. And so we did, in order to bring out the baseline or the status quo or what prevails, we then looked at the desk survey, as I've said. We looked at the desk survey. We read 61 books and articles in order to come up with the history of Zimbabwe. And this is not a complete history because there's a lot more to it. But just to have an overview, an understanding of the history of Zimbabwe. And so we did an overview. We then put in place a research instrument that takes us to the field, that has structured questions and semi-structured questions that allows participants or respondents to make input, to make observations. to put in place, to talk about their beliefs even, and their values and their understanding. And so it allows us to do that. And so in order to fulfill the reliability, validity, and so forth. And then we also have focus group discussions in the SEM. So focus group discussions with traditional leaders. We're going to do focus group discussions with women's organizations, with youth organizations, with political parties, with war veterans associations, in order to understand. So the research instruments that we used will ensure that there is a recoining of the national narratives. Because you realize that there are gaps in the history of Zimbabwe. We actually need a history that is owned by every Zimbabwean. Currently, it really depends on who is writing. If the person writing wants to favor this political position, they will do that.
The history they'll tell.
If they want to favor this ethnic dimension, they do that. And so we are saying it is the mandate and the responsibility of Nprc not to write, but to facilitate the writing of a national narrative that plugs in the gaps, that omitted certain events to ensure that there is restoration of Zimbabweans, because we could have identified with the history.
Now, of course, you work closely with the Complaints Handling and Investigations Thematic Committee in your efforts for research and knowledge information and things like that. But do you go to these places for first-hand information of people who have survived these conflicts by any chance?
Yes, we do. And we, as I've already said, the Commission has taken a bottom-up approach. A bottom-up approach means you are starting from communities. And we also have taken a victim-centeredness approach, where we are saying the victim is in the center of the resolution of the conflict. In other words, the Commission is not going to go to the victim and say, we think you need this, and we think you need this. But the victim themselves will then say, for me to heal, I need this, I need A, B, C, D. Because the assumptions that you might make might actually result in after interventions, then the victim is not even satisfied because you have prescribed for the victim. And so we are saying, as the Research and Knowledge Management Thematic Committee, we are developing a satisfaction index. When interventions have taken place, we will then go back to the victim and say, how satisfied are you? How satisfied are you in the resolution of the conflict that befell you? And the victim will be able to say, I am really satisfied. So the victim-centeredness approach ensures that the Commission does nothing without the victim. It is the victim who prescribes what the resolution approaches that they design.
Now, you mentioned earlier before our break that you're going as far back as 11th century in your research approach. What are some of the locations and places that you've had to go to get a full appreciation of the history of those places in regards to the conflicts they've experienced?
Oh, we had to go to start off with the National Archives, where we had to go back to look at the various documents. We came across documents that were written during Cecil John Rhodes' time, when he came with 400 policemen to Zimbabwe for colonization. We came with a number of documents that we saw that happened, that were written during the liberation struggle, particularly run up to the Lancaster House conference. We came up with documents that were written by scholars. And as I've said, we have gone through 61 books and articles scholars have written on it. And so there are a number of sources of information that we interrogated in order to have the understanding that we now have.
Do you have any current provinces that you're working in at the moment?
Every commissioner is responsible for a province. Every commissioner has a province that they manage. Like I am responsible for Mashonaland West. Commissioner Golden Chekenyere is responsible for Masvingo province. Commissioner Patience Chiradza is responsible for Manicaland. Commissioner Charles Masunungure is responsible for Mashonaland Central. Commissioner Charles Jeffrey Chada is responsible for Mashonaland East, and so forth. So all the commissioners, Commissioner in Matabeleland, we have 2 commissioners. We have the chairperson, retired Justice Selo Masolenare, and Commissioner Leslie Ngwe. And so they superintend Bulawayo, Mat North and Mat South. We also had to take ethnic dimensions into it. Commissions who understand the cultures of those particular provinces. And hence with that deployment of Justice Marcelo Nare and Commissioner Leslie Ngwe in Matabeleland North South and Bulawayo, to ensure that they understand, and also the other commissioners taking into cognizance their understanding. Yeah.
Now, you went to great lengths to tell us about the strategic plan of the Nprc. Can you tell us some of the mechanisms that you've put in place for the strategic delivery of this strategic plan?
Yes. And so the mechanisms that I've already started to talk about are the provincial committees. Also, maybe let me start off by the commission itself. We have the chairmanship held by retired Justice Marcelo Nare, who superintends the whole commission and who is responsible for steering the board in a particular direction. And we have the deputy chair, Commissioner Lilian Chigwedere, by the way, who is responsible for Harare province, who is also the deputy chair. And she too assists retired Justice Marcelo Nare. So those are the delivery vehicles. And we have got 7 other commissioners who are in there, who also provide policy guidelines. The commission is responsible for policy. And then we have secretariats that is responsible for implementation. So when the policy is proclaimed by the commissioners, it's then passed to the secretariat, and secretariat is responsible for implementation. And we also have the provincial peace committees as a mechanism for delivery that says the peace committees that are derived and that constitutes our stakeholders, that constitutes civil society organizations, that constitutes we have war veterans, we have state organs in there, we have civil society, we have youth organizations, we have church-based organizations, we even have the Islamic community in the provincial peace committees. And so they are responsible for ensuring that there is harmony, promotion of peace at provincial level, because they are centered in the provinces and they are responsible for making recommendations to the commission to ensure that there is promotion of peace. Yeah.
Of course, Zimbabwe has its share of conflict dating back hundreds of years. How have you prioritized the resolution of conflicts that have taken place in Zimbabwe to this point?
Okay, so we have said already that we have taken a victim-centered approach. That no victim will be turned away. The victim who comes with a conflict, with a complaint, will then be addressed. But maybe let me go through the various conflicts so that possibly there can be a complete understanding as to the various epochs of conflicts that have bedeviled Zimbabwe, so that you also can have an understanding of why these conflicts should be prioritized, because of the cyclical nature of those conflicts. They keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And so there was a natural persuasion to the commission to pick on those conflicts that keep coming back. So let me take you through the conflicts that we reviewed as a commission in order to have a map. And earlier on, we couldn't fit the map in this room. We were struggling until we said, let's leave the map.
Tell us about the map.
Because the map covers 3 sides of this room that shows the amount of conflicts that Zimbabweans have gone through. And so what we did as a commission was to start off from the nation-state formation, even before the formation of the nation-state, where I said 11th century Mapungubuke, there were 5,000 people in that grouping, a very powerful ethnic group, that was trading and that was farming, trading with China, trading with the Eastern community, and in gold and so forth, and spices. And so archaeological findings have actually established that this community of 5,000 left in a hurry. And of course, there are perceptions as to why they left in a hurry. And one of the perceptions, or the hypothesis, is that they left in a hurry because of conflict. Others say they left in a hurry because of the weather and weather changing patterns and so forth and so forth. And so if you start from there, you then have an understanding as to how then did this group of people evolve. And from there on, you then, during that time, there's the discovery of iron. And the discovery of iron catalyzes the formation of nation states. Because before, there was a different governance system. But when iron is discovered, there is then this appetite to form permanent groupings of nation states in order to capitalize on the iron. So already you have the issue of natural resources as far back as 11th century, the founding of the iron coming into place. And you also have to notice that 1760s, you have the Industrial Revolution that increased the appetite for natural resources. And hence you see Germany started to have an interest in iron and textile. Belgium, iron and textile. Germany was interested in mining. And so you have the formation of the nation states, you have the Industrial Revolution, you have an increased appetite for productivity. You have an increased appetite for natural resources. And where are the natural resources? They are in Africa. And so you see the issue of geopolitics then also plays a critical role. Markets are in Africa, natural resources are in Africa. Post-French Revolution, you also see European countries also having an appetite, an increased appetite for resources in Africa. You see Britain and France are interested in Western Africa. You see France and Belgium are interested in Central Africa. You see Portuguese in East Africa and Belgium in East Africa. And so this appetite then sets a foundation for conflicts. Because, and juxtapose that with the Portuguese, who had earlier on come into Africa around the 1500s in order to capitalize on the natural resources. And so you realize that then they put in the Prazo system. The farming is divided along tribal lines, along ethnic lines. You see manipulation of chiefs. One chief is favored against the other. And you put that in a box, you have a concoction. Or you put that in a pot, you have a concoction for conflict. Hence, you then realize that the partitioning of Africa of 1884, 1885, then is a realization by European powers to say we need to partition Africa properly so that we can plunder the resources. And so you are having a conflict that has geopolitical connotations that is starting from outside Africa into Africa. And Africa has its own challenges that they were also having. Again, the issue of political dominance, the issue of land, the issue of resources then takes place. And so this is how far back we have traced. So you actually then look at the adventure of Cecil John Rhodes with the Rudd Concession. Armed with the Rudd Concession, the Royal Charter given by the Queen Victoria of Britain. And so you now are adding more states coming into the same natural resources conflict. What is Cecil John Rhodes coming to do? He's coming for the natural resources. And so the conflict then heightens. You have federation, 10 years, 1953 to 1963. what is in the federation, they are interested in Zambia's tea and copper. They are interested in Zimbabwe's gold, diamond, and tantalite. And you can see the heightening of natural resource conflicts with them. And it is the same process from the federation that forms Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. And so you would, if you analyze, so the commission sat down and analyzed all this and say, so what are we getting? What conflicts then come out of this? You see there's natural resource conflicts. You see there's class conflicts, the haves and the have-nots. You see there's a racial conflict, people coming from outside against Africans. You see there's violent conflicts because political domination is violent by nature. You also have geopolitical conflicts. You have ethnic conflicts. So you can trace our ethnic conflicts that we have challenges with today to that epoch of history. The Portuguese, the Prazo system, and unresolved conflicts throughout till today. And so we are saying this epoch, this pre-colonial adventure also sets us for conflict as people. And we were also gullible to be used, to be divided and used. And brother fought against brother, and sister fought against, and chief fought against chief. And while we are fighting, the resources are going, the natural resources are going. So that's why we said it is important even to have this pre-colonial setting and understand. That's why I'm saying the commission is of the understanding that if you then do not go into those details, if you then do not have that particular understanding of why certain organizations behave the way they behave, then you are in trouble. Then you risk causing more conflict. Let's look at the latter phase. We have colonialism, we have the coming in of Cecil John Rhodes, because we took, as a commission, we took a timeline analysis to conflicts, and mapping and analysis. And so the period then, Cecil John Rhodes comes in, there is the initial colonization process, and there is a corresponding response by Africans to the colonial adventure. And so you will see that 1963, you realize the formation of political parties from NDI, from ANC, and from the City Youth League and so forth. But you realize that 1963, the ZAPU splits. ZAPU splits and the formation of ZAN. And the splitting of ZAPU is violent. And the formation of ZANU is violent. And so now you have moved the conflict from the geopolitics. You are now talking about conflicts inside the nation state. And now you're seeing the liberation movements, now conflicts between them. So when you talk today about inter-party violence, it did not start... It
starts just in the last 10 years.
Yes. It can be traced back to 1963. And so you also have a lot of things then happening during that particular epoch. You have UDI in 1965. You also have the Battle of Chinhoyi in 1966. You also have the Nyazonya attack in 1967. You also have UN sanctions in 1968. You also have settlement proposals. So you have detent 1974. That sort relaxation, Henry Kissinger then said it's relaxation. But when you analyze this history, you have Chitepo assassination 1975, Chimoya attack in 1970. You have the Naribaza rebellion. And so you are now starting to find conflict within political parties and conflict across political parties. Because it is not only within, it's not only across, it was also the issue of Naribaza rebellion, Mukagao declaration, all those issues were within political parties. And so what we are saying as a commission is, how then can we democratize our political parties? To ensure that, because you see it up to today. Yes. You see leadership challenges in political parties, you see succession issues that are violent in political parties. You see intolerance in political parties. And so for Zimbabweans to be able to move forward, we need to be able to democratize our politics. We need to be able to cultivate tolerance. To say, it's okay, Christian, you can belong to party A and I belong to party B, and it's okay. It's okay that when the term of office for our leader, as we have agreed, comes to an end, somebody takes over, it's okay. And so as a commission, this is what we want to achieve. To say, even if you look at this particular epoch, we need to capitalize on the independence that brought a cessation of hostilities, a cessation of the war, and then build on it to say, how then do we cultivate positive peace? Because peace is just not the absence of war and conflict and violence. It's just not that. But it is positive peace is where all nations are striving to be, where there is well-being, where there is happiness, where there is a coexistence, where there is unity, where there is cohesion. That's where we want to go. And we can then make a decision to say these aspects happened. We accept and acknowledge that our politics has been like this, but we can chart a new trajectory going forward. We can chart a new harmonious future going forward. And hence you see the challenges, the conflicts in the prehistoric, the conflicts in the liberation movements and colonialism are then taken post-independence. And you realize that the ethnic conflicts continue to be there, and we still have them today. Racial conflicts continue, and we still have them today. Political domination and violence, we still have it today. Geopolitics has not left us. Geopolitics has not left us. And say, as a commission, the aspect of research and research is to ask questions that nobody has asked before. Any researcher worth their salt will say, you must ask questions that have not been asked before. So could it be that the violence that we have seen, could it be that it's a continuation of geopolitics for natural resources? Could it be that we are a people who are failing to coin a new direction, to coin a new phase of coexistence, harmony, unity, and cohesion? And so those questions then come to the fore to say, in this epoch, we are not just hitting ourselves down, but we are saying, this happened. How do we move forward? How do we heal those who are hurt? How do we reconcile? How do we have restorative dialogues in order for Zimbabwe, in order for everybody to... You go to Gukrawundi, Christine. You go to Gukrawundi. We took it as an epoch in itself because of its magnitude. So we've said pre-colonial, colonial, the liberation, and to Gukrawundi. And so for us to be able to understand is to have a complete understanding that Gukrawundi did not start in 1983. Gukrawundi started, the signs and symptoms and manifestations again can be traced back to the politics of the 1960s. And where the split and the formation are riddled, among other things, were of course other things that caused the split and that caused the formation of SANU. But the other aspect that is there was also the ethnic dimension. And you have got to interrogate and have that understanding. It starts back to the 60s. And then you go on to the liberation struggle. You see 1971, there's the Zipper adventure, where you have Zipper forces and Zanla forces coming together to fight as one force. It lasts 1 year. It lasts 1 year, there's conflict, there's tension, there's suspicion. Zipper had to run back to Botswana. And so you then go on to 1979, 1980, the politics therein. For you to be able to understand what happened in Gukrawundi, you have got to understand when there is
history that comes before that time.
And so the assembly points for disarmament, for that took place of both Zanla and Zebra cadres then take place. And people are put in assembly points. They are still armed. There is no reconciliation that has taken place. There is no psychotherapy. They are put in very small houses, very close to each other. In Ntumbani, they were in the same place. In Chitungwiza, they were 2 kilometers apart. And the inevitable happens. There are clashes in Chitungwiza. There are clashes at Konmara. There are clashes in Chinoi. And in Ntumbani, one happens. And so the commission then is analyzing to say, could it be what demon is there? What is the role of geopolitics?
Exactly.
And so forth. So Ntumbani happens, really showing the magnitude of the hostility that happened. And so during the same phase, you also have South Africa, apartheid South Africa, playing a role. You have the Selous Scouts being trained in South Africa to come and destabilize Zimbabwe because it was not in the interest of South Africa for Zimbabwe to be stable, because PAC, ANC were being supported from here. And so the Selous Scout project called Project Banako happens in Pretoria. People are trained in Pretoria. People are crossing to destabilize. And the geopolitics continues. And you also have Selous Scouts that are formed in South Africa also to come. So now we are looking at Kukurawundi, the actors. You have 5th Brigade, you have the Selous Scouts, you have the ZNA, you have all those, you have the dissidents. You have a plethora of players. And so for you to be able to make interventions, you have got to be able to sit down and say, what was the role of the dissidents? What was the role of the 5th Brigade? What was the role of Selous Scouts? What was the role of the Project Banako? What was it? What was the role of geopolitics? And so the issue of healing and reconciliation is tedious, my sister. It's tedious. It takes your energy. So when you are planning, the planning process takes long. Now the commission has planned everything. We are now on the verge of implementation. And so the last phase is the post-independence, where it is rooted in the Cold War, end of the Cold War, socialism, communism collapses, capitalism takes precedence. All the nations are running with IMF and World Bank policies that doesn't augur well for a young independent Zimbabwe, and hence you see conflicts coming, people striking, the riots and so forth. And you have the formation of political parties, MDC, and you have now a protracted electoral violence from 2000. 2000 election is violent, 2002 is violent, 2008 is the most violent of all. And it goes back to our politics, it goes back to our systems and to our processes, and we are basically saying we need to go back to the drawing board.
Back to the drawing board to do it all the right way. Now, unfortunately, Commissioner, we've run out of time, but could you tell us very quickly on what the Research and Knowledge Management Thematic Committee and its priorities for 2020?
Okay. Maybe let me talk about the Nprc roadmap. Because the priorities of research and knowledge management are also in the roadmap. So where is the Nprc going? We have done the preparatory work. We have done all this work. The implementation becomes easy. No wonder why South Africa prepared 1.5 years and did the implementation in 6 months. And so we are saying we are going to be doing a baseline survey that looks at the conflicts from 11th century. We are going to ask respondents to say, what is your view? What is your perception? What do you think are the strategies that should be put in place in order to resolve this? So our questionnaire is actually categorized into these conflict epochs. To say, these epochs, what do you think? In this epochs, what do you think? In this epochs, what do you think? So this baseline survey, the survey is also going to look at social cohesion index, to say, to be able to evaluate with scientific rigor and knowledge, to say how united are Zimbabweans at this particular time. So we'll be able to use it, you know, as you go on. And this is a legacy that the Nprc would like to leave for Zimbabweans to be able. So we do a baseline service. We're going to do hearings, public hearings and private hearings. And while we are doing hearings, we are going to have complaints handling. So hearings are taking place, complaints handling. Whoever is a complaint can come and lodge a complaint, and Commissioner Charles, Reverend Charles Masunungure, will be heading the complaints and handling and investigations. Victim support, gender and diversity will be there to offer psychosocial support to the victims. Research will also be there to document who said what, when, how do we manage whatever has been said. Monitoring and evaluation will also be there to say, are we on target? Do we need to reframe? Do we need to add something? Do we need to subtract something? So, yeah, so that is the roadmap for the Nprc that is going to take place soon after the environment opens for activities.
Well, Commissioner, thank you so much for that. And we've got some feedback from our viewers at home, particularly from Rita Sharon Chiketa, who says, where can they get more information?
The information is on our website. Commissioner Charles Masunungure already shared that. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of information that we have. Mm-hmm. So we are going to package it in a way. Our media department has been working very hard to ensure that everybody gets this information at whatever level. Mm-hmm. Those who have access to internet will use the websites. Those who are in the communities, we are developing flyers, pamphlets. We are going to have billboards that will speak to the conflict map that I've just outlined and the various aspects. We'll use newspapers. And this also is one of the platforms that you've afforded us to come and talk about the issues. We're going to have jingles, songs, plays, poetry, in order to ensure that every level in Zimbabwe has access to our information.
Okay. Thank you so much, Commissioner Ndoro, for that. Now, you've been watching State of the Nation, and our discussion, of course, was the Nprc Visibility and Awareness Campaign, focusing today, of course, on the Research and Knowledge Management Thematic Committee. Thank you again for joining us, and for more feedback from you, please follow us on our Facebook page, Zimpapers Television Network, and at Twitter, ZTN.ZTNTV. Thanks for watching.